Hi there and welcome. I'm Victoria. Great to have you here once again. Hello, new people. Okay, so I read some really good books this time. There might be only like one that maybe didn't turn out to be as great as I hoped. There is a variety here, so stick with me and I hope you have a great time. This is the Emma M. Lyon Volume 5, the fifth journal. This one is actually, I think, the biggest out of all of them so far, and they're usually not too thick, but this one starts in November and it goes through December. So it was a perfect time for me to read this because it's the end of November. This was a very good one. I mean, they're all really great. It's not my favorite of the bunch, but I loved it. What I love is that Emma, she has very caring friends. When they see that she is hurting or they know that she's going through something, they do whatever they can to try to give her some peace. And sometimes, like in this one, she has a friend that stands up to her and says, okay, I know why you're doing this, and like kind of gives her grief. And she's like, what are you talking about? But then later she remembers what they said and she's like, okay. Each one of the people that have been in her life for a little bit, they are starting to grow with her and understanding of how to handle her. All of the friends kind of realize where she is right now as she's been grieving someone for 3 years. And she's on this hunt for the Roman, who is mentioned throughout the books, but not so much lately. But in this book, she brings him back to life by saying that she wants to find the Roman. Now, the Roman is supposed to be some ghost in the whole town that like haunts the area. And she's been wanting to know who it is and if people have seen the Roman. Very interesting. There's humor around it. What I love about this one is we get a little bit more of Hawk's story. Not much, but we get more of his character in there, and I feel like he's so mysterious and fascinating. So I loved that he's a pastor, but he gets away with like reading a Christmas carol in December to like his congregation, and that they're so touched by it. He's not like preaching from the Bible, but they're all like, wow. So yeah, she talks about All Saints Day going into Christmas time. She has a lot more female friends that pop up in this one, which I liked because you hear from them here and there, but in this one, there's like a little bit more of it. There was a very sad situation. One of her friends that's like not one of her top friends, but someone that kind of orders her around in a way, comes in and wants her to pretend to be someone she's not temporarily. And she's just like, I can't do that. Says, I can't lie. The scene around that was very sad, but very good. And to see a little bit of a human side of this one character that wanted her to do that. It was very sweet, but really sad. Like this was a different type of book to me, the way this one came across. I mean, not too much, but I feel like there were some good things that came out of this one. The Man Who Invented Motion Pictures. I had this on my to-read list for a few years and I was like, time to cut this out. I want to read this for this year. Like this was my goal. So like I'm kind of pushing to finish the books that I had wanted to read this year that I had like kind of not added to my, I'm going to read it this month type of thing. So it's like, let's fit in what I can before the end of the year. And I think I only have like 1 or 2 books, maybe just 1 book left that I had been wanting to read all year. But The Man Who Invented Motion Pictures, this is about Louis de Prince. He is the actual person that invented the motion picture, the moving picture, however you want to call it. He had a business relationship with Thomas Edison, who kept trying to take his ideas, kept trying to take his invention. And this guy, Louis de Prince, he had patents and he had been the first person to patent this. And he's like, no, this is my invention. So a lot of this book talks about the life of Louis de Prince and then how he eventually got involved with Thomas Alva Edison. So there's a little bit about Edison in this too, which now in New Jersey, I live by the museum, like not too far away. I went to the museum a few years ago with my sons, with my whole family, and I plan to go there again. And, you know, at the museum, they talked about Nikola Tesla and how his ideas were taken. And then I've also been to another area a little bit further south in New Jersey, where there was some other museum that I visited as a kid for a field trip that I really liked. But Louis de Prince, so he was born in France and he had family that lived in England. He had been like back and forth. And so they tell about his life. He has a wife that he really, truly loved, had a bunch of kids with her. And then he, you know, she believed in his inventions. And so he goes around to all these different places and he writes to her. He's very closely in touch with her. And then he just goes missing. So this is trying to solve his mystery of being missing, but like no one really found answers. So it's like a cold case. You know, some people think, and In fact, his wife thought Thomas Alva Edison had been involved in his missing case. It was just shortly after his disappearance that Edison then took all the credit for his motion pictures. So she was just like, I don't think that he's missing. I think they know exactly where he is, or they killed him. And then his family had to pull away the pieces and fight for his patents, even because Thomas Edison kept trying to take over the patent, trying to do lawsuits, try to win them. And they're like, no, you can't do that. So he kept trying and trying. So this book talks all about that. It's very informational, maybe a little too informational at times, but it was very interesting to learn the history behind how the invention was made even. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then of course I looked up the first movies that were ever created by Louis de Prince, and they're very short, but it was just really cool. So I love this. The Neverending Story, this I talked about being my favorite book, but I read this just over the past several months to my whole family. It's pretty long, and with one of my kids, he works a lot and sometimes he gets home late. Trying to find a time to read to everyone, it took a while, but this was my second time reading this book. My husband also adores this book and has read it on his own. I read it on my own. So to read it to my family, it was just to see them learning and enjoying it, and to rediscover it myself later on in my life, because I was in my 20s, I think, when I first read this. So it's just like, now that I'm in my 40s to get this, it's just still lovable, still wonderful, and it has a lot of morals and lessons to learn from. I think there are like maybe 2 times they use the D word in this. There is some violence in this, just so you're aware. I think if you have a kid read this, they should be maybe like 11 or older. But if you don't know this story, this is about Bastian, who he actually steals this book, so there is theft in this too. He takes this book from a bookstore, goes to a school. Now, if you've seen the movie, you'll know, like, for the most part, the story, but this story that you know is only like to hear. This is the story you know. This is the rest of the story. If you've seen the second movie, then the story goes to here and doesn't really cover all of it, but little bits and pieces of it. So just so you know that, so you're aware. And I never saw the third movie that came out even later. I'm not interested. The second wasn't even that great. So that's why. Anyway, so Bastian, he starts reading this book and finds that he is starting to become very closely linked to Atreyu, who is picked to try to help an illness for the childlike empress who rules over Fantastica, not Fantasia as in the movie, Fantastica in the book. Bastian just like really loves being able to read this, and he's sucked into it. That's all I'll say about it, but it's very adventurous, lots of fantasy, lots of different places within this story, lots of characters over time that you get to learn about. Some are very heartwarming and some are very like frightening. Love this book. This is a 5-star read for me. So this is the 6th 5-star read book that I had this year. A Scandal in Mayfair. I don't know why I didn't finish this book originally, because this is the 5th book, I believe, in Lily Adler mystery. There are no books after this, and I don't know if they're going to come out with more, because it's been several years since this was written, maybe like 7 years. But Lily Adler, so if you have read the first books, she is a widow. She's been widowed for a while. In the first book, she overhears someone scream. She finds out that there has been a murder, and she wants to solve the case because it involves a friend of hers being in that area. And so she's trying to solve the case. She has the help of a friend that she has known for a long time who is a captain. And so the two of them, they start solving cases together. And now we're in the 5th book. And in this one, it's interesting because she gets the help of a lot of her friends to try to solve a case of really 2 stories in one. The first one is that there is a will that is left to this one woman, but it's like stripped from her and she didn't get anything. So they try to find the real will. So they try to look for it. There is some romance in this. There is one heavy makeout scene that I was like, okay, I don't know, it's going a little far. There are none of that in any of the other books. And this one, this is the most that you get. It's still clean. There's like nothing mentioned, but it was just like, it seems kind of intense and very passionate. So while she's looking for this, there's a murder that happens. So then she tries to solve that. And now she's had these instances where she has solved these murders. So now the police, they work with her a little bit because they realize she actually is pretty good at it. So Jack is the captain. So Lily and Jack, Great teamwork in this. And it was very sweet. The ending was very nice, but it did leave it open as if there could be another book, I feel. But like I said, I don't know if there is one. I'd have to look into that to see if it just wasn't included in the series list on Goodreads. But I'm glad I finally read this one. I feel like all of this series are kind of like 3-star reads for me, so they're good. I had fun reading them. Small things like these. I just read this today in like an hour and a half. It is pretty short. There are 114 pages in it. I had no idea what this was going to be about. I wanted to read this in the winter time. Still a little early for winter time, but I wanted to get some of the books from the library before people check them out. And this was the first one that I had gotten from there. I was blown away. This is a 5-star read for me, my 7th 5-star read book this year out of over 200 books. So small things like these, they actually mention small things like these in a conversation that the main character has with his wife. By the way, I found out that there is a movie version of this, so I have not seen it. I don't know how closely it relates to it. I'll have to see it to find out myself. But this book is so good, even though it's so short. It's well written. It is set in, well, the start of the book starts in 1946, I believe it was, where the main character, he talks about his life, not his life so much, but more of his mother's life. So he talks where his mother was only like 16 years old when she gave birth to him. So it's set in Ireland. She was doing cleaning and she got hired by this widow who had compassion upon her because she had been a pregnant teen and was cast away by her parents. She takes in this woman, she gives birth to a son, and she kind of raises her son, with her as much as possible. So now the son is grown up. So now it's in the 80s. And the son is nearing 40. He has a wife and 5 daughters. And so he talks about his job, what he does for a living, connection to his children and his wife. And you see that he is such a family-oriented man. He loves his family deeply. So while he is doing his job, he comes across this convent that he goes to mass with his family constantly. But he learns something with his eyes just paying attention that is questionable, and it gets him thinking throughout the rest of the story about what he should do. And it makes him think of his mother, and it makes him think of his upbringing and how if someone had compassion on his mother, maybe he should have compassion on someone in the same way. I loved it. Oh, wow. This was a powerful story. And what I found out is in the last, after the epilogue, I think there's an epilogue. Oh no, it says a note on the text. We found out that while this is a work of fiction, it is based off of a true event that happened in Ireland. Honestly, it's really crazy that I had no idea what this was about, because this has a lot of stuff about labor trafficking that when you look at this, you had no idea. I was just blown away because it's so where my heartstrings are, about people that are mistreated and that were found out for it. And it's just it makes me want to look into it more. I love when you have some history that's tied into stories that you can research and find out further information. So this was excellent. And it is set around Christmas time. The entire story, except for the very beginning, is set around Christmas time. For content, there are 3 uses of the F word, and not by the main character. It's more like things of people with passion going through really hard things that he hears them say it. Trust God, love people. Now, Jenny Mars, she is one of those renovation show host people that she and her husband, she's a designer and he is the one that does the building. I was offered this book to read this. This actually just came out a few weeks ago. I was asked to review this. It was so good. So From Fixer to Fabulous is the name of the show, by the way. I have seen some of the episodes of it. I plan on watching more. It's a very nice show. I really like their renovations and they seem to have fun. So if you don't mind reading about motherhood, if you are a mother, you probably love this, but there are so many hard things in here. So she talks about loss of miscarriage. She talks about going through a hard time with carrying twins and the very difficult situation of birthing them. She talks about adoption, how there's a child that she truly deeply wanted to adopt in the Congo, but how hard and how long it took before she could actually have her child with her finally. So that whole story was a big portion of this, but this gives you a whole different perspective. Now, this is more of a motherly perspective. And she talks a lot about what the people in the Congo were going through. Her child had to be taken out of the orphanage because it wasn't that great. But then they started to get funds to try to feed the people in the orphanage, because when they went there themselves, they saw how they didn't really have much. It was filled with all these children. So they do a lot for orphans. And so throughout this, she talks a lot about her passion and her love for her children and for God. Her love for Christ moves her to do these things. He moves her in motherhood, and that even though she is just a mom, she could do a lot. She also talks about living on the farm, and then she talks about birthing another child, but not as much as the other stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff about motherhood, and then the work on the farm that she does and her love for animals and just the stories around that were just very sweet. It is a touching story. It is a little bit hard to read if you are going through some things yourself, but I think it could encourage you and help you even through those struggles. So there's a lot of talk about her faith throughout this book. And I really didn't know that she had such a strong faith. She also talks about meeting her husband and what that was like too. And so that was sweet. So totally recommend for those who like to watch that show or were interested in her life or just want to read a good faith story. The Book of Doors. This is also a book that I meant to read last year that I finally read this year. This one I went into blindly, actually. I just heard such great things about it. I had friends that had read it and said it's so good, and I didn't ask what it was about. I was hoping they would tell me, and they didn't, and I was just like, okay, I want to go through this blindly. And it was so good. If you want to go into it blindly, go read it. It's excellent. It is a fantasy / sci-fi in a way story. I think more fantasy, but I can see where there are sci-fi elements to it. So Cassie works at a bookstore, and she interacts with this one man. His name is Mr. Weber. She becomes pretty close to him, but he's still just kind of a customer, not like in depth, but she appreciates him and their friendship. But he leaves her this book, and it's called The Book of Doors, and she's with her roommate Izzy, and they're very good friends. And while they're like hanging out, she's like talking about this book, and she realizes that this book has magical elements to it where you could be transported to different places. So she starts to go places that she had been talking about to her friend who had never been anywhere, and she's like, well, let's go there then. But her friend's like, hey, this could be dangerous. You're dealing with magic here. You got to keep your distance. I think that this could be really a problem. She's like, oh no, this is just fun. But while she's transporting, even just in her own area where she lives, there's this man that also understands her book, and he's like, whoa, he goes up to her. I know what you have, and I need to help you. You're in danger. So then he tries to warn her, and so they go through their own adventures, and there's so much that I'm not going to go into, but she learns so much about this book, and it's kind of crazy at times what you find out that she finds out about this book. And there are a lot of characters that are introduced throughout it, but I feel like you get to understand who they are and you don't get lost in that, because I struggle with characters when they're like too many, but they're slowly introduced and you get to understand each one. There is so much character growth throughout this book, so I love it. There were 3 uses of bad language in this that I noticed only. There's a lot of violence though, and some of it is kind of gruesome, not too much, but it's like kind of intense. Like I would have given this a 5-star read, but because of all the like gruesomeness, I had to back away from that. So it was so close because it was just such an excellent story. It was told very well. I loved the adventure. The fantasy elements were great. Some of these like tugged at my emotions because of some of the interactions she has with other people and she learns about them. Like you hear some of their story, and that was really touching, really touching. So great book. And the last book is Vulnerable. This book, I've had this for a couple months and I was like pushing it aside a little bit, but granted, it was also the oldest book in my to read list for the currently. Like it wasn't earlier in this year, but I was like, let's get this done with. So I was really happy to finally read this. It is about not just the issues of human trafficking, which is what I thought this was only going to be about, but this is about the author and his time exploring his faith. He learns about human trafficking and he wants to do something about it, that he sells everything he has. He I guess he becomes a minimalist like I did. Like when I first found out about human trafficking, it compelled me too. He moved to New York City and then wanted to find work involving trying to end human trafficking. So he talks about some of the things he finds out. This is not like an informational book. If you're looking for statistics and things like that, I wouldn't recommend this for that. But then he goes into how Christ compels us to help not just human trafficking victims and trying to help them, but to love our neighbor as ourselves and to help the vulnerable, and how when we see someone who is vulnerable, how we should be like the Good Samaritan who puts ourselves aside to help them, to put them first before your own needs and comfort. Talks a lot about scriptures around this. I really felt challenged at times by it, to have these things told to me in a way that got to renew my understanding once again about it. He does give a few stories of those who have been put into like sex trafficking. There are no details throughout this, but But then he also talks about how we need to be vulnerable as people, especially if you're a Christian, how when you're vulnerable, it helps people see that you are human and that you have compassion and empathy for them. So that way you could connect with others and understand them in the way that Jesus does with us. So he even gives examples of how Jesus was vulnerable and how Jesus told his disciples how they should be vulnerable. And it gave a lot of food for thought, and I loved it. He was vulnerable, and he said that he had struggles with pornography, but then he talks about the dangers and problems of pornography and how many people that are put in pornography are actually human trafficked victims. And that's something that I've known for many years. And I've read accounts of those who have been put through those situations. And he just briefly touches on this, but also gives help for those that maybe have pornography addiction. He himself has talked about how learning about all this stuff helped get him out of that. So yes, this has a lot in it. There was nothing raunchy in this whatsoever, nothing descriptive. I thought it was excellent. The amount of scripture used throughout it, the amount of personal accounts, the amount of encouraging words, and even some factual things to try to emphasize the importance of ending modern day slavery. So yeah, I loved all these books. I had no complaints about any of these books. They were all very good. So if you want to read them, there's so many different types of books that I just gave you stories from. So good. So thank you so much. I hope you love these books. If you have read these, tell me your thoughts. If you haven't, but you're interested in them, tell me. I love this. Thanks again for watching and for the support that you give and for the support of watching and commenting and liking, subscribing. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful start of December. I think this episode is my first December post here. So yeah, let's give it up. We are in Christmas time. So I had one Christmas book, but you're going to get a whole bunch more soon. Okay, bye guys.